Okay, so welcome to tonight. So tonight's topic with Mark Smith and Ann Dodge is keeping together in sport. So again, this is one that we've been excited about because I've had a high number of requests, and then talking to other coaching leads in other provinces have discovered that this topic is in demand nationwide. So clearly something our coaches want to hear about. So I'm happy tonight to have Mark and Ann joining us. So Mark Smith is a softball coach, works with the women's national team, and was previously with our center here at the Canadian Sports Centre Atlantic. So we're lucky to have him in the region. And Ann Dodge is a former athlete and has Olympic athlete, and works at Acadia University in the kinesiology department, and has had a very busy career in sport as well. So where we thought this was such a neat fit is the questions I continue to get are things like, how do I keep a family? How do I build a family while being a busy coach traveling? How do I explain to my spouse how coaching works, and I'm working crazy hours and I'm traveling all the time? How do I keep my spouse while keeping coaching? That's one of the things I continue to get asked. I'm not kidding. I've gotten asked, I think, 3 times in the last 18 months. And my real answer was, I don't have the answer. So let's talk to some people who might, and who have some experience in the area of, staying together through the high stress sport environment. So I'd like to start it off, Mark and Ann, with just telling us a little bit about your story, your personal story.
Well, we do have a story, and I think, I'm proud to say it's a lengthy one. We have been married for 30 years. It was 30 years in September. And through our entire relationship, we were together a year before that. Mark has either played softball at a high level, uh, coached his own club team here in Nova Scotia, coached both the men's and women's national softball teams one summer that overlapped, Canada Games coach, and now is the head coach of the women's softball team in preparation for 2020 for the games in Tokyo. So we have certainly dealt with this particular topic in a very real way. So I guess maybe we are good candidates to speak about um, the topic for sure. But I believe so much of it comes down to your own values, as I believe most decisions in our lives are informed by our values. So what really mattered to me was that my family was central to everything that we do. It still is. We have a 24-year-old daughter, so no longer lives here with us, but is still very much part of our lives. We still tag around after her, watching her play volleyball. So that really, the central piece of it for me has been that we would be successful as a family, and we would be a family unit, and we'd find some way to make it work. So that I would start with that.
Yeah, I think I think the most important thing for younger people who are involved in relationships or younger marriages is to really make sure that your partner understands the level of commitment that's involved with the vocation that you've chosen. To be a successful coach, or to give yourself a chance to be a successful coach, is a lot of hard work. And the only way you get better at anything is to put your time in and to work at it. And for me, having a wife that was a former Olympic athlete, that understood exactly how hard you have to work to be successful, and the type of time and level of commitment that's involved, has certainly made my life simpler, and I think made for the relationship to work at times when there is high stress. Because, as Ann alluded to, when we first got together, I played on the national team, as well as traveled throughout North America and played in a senior circuit, and I was gone most weekends of the summer, and often leaving on a Friday and coming home on a late Sunday night or a Monday morning, and then had a job to go to. So when Jazz came along, the chow rearing, especially in the summertime, was done by Ann. I certainly was supportive to the extent I could be, but the truth of the matter is I wasn't there a whole lot. So I think a big part of it is you and your partner have to. This is something you have to be in together. I know that I could not have survived it if Ann hadn't been willing to be as patient as she has been over the years to allow me to pursue my passion. Because if you don't have a partner that's prepared to to support you through it, it's a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah, and I think that's been a big piece of the conversation and ask from the coaches, and that's a perfect way to frame it is the values and making family a central part, and then the understanding. So, and I guess a question for you is, you have that great strong background as an athlete, or either one of you guys actually. If the other person's if the spouse is not an athlete or doesn't have that background, how would you explain the demands of a coaching career or a coaching lifestyle to that other person, in your opinion?
I guess I'd have to start with you don't know what you don't know. So you couldn't expect someone to understand the depth of what's involved or the commitment that's involved if you haven't
Mm-hmm.
lived it. So through no fault of their own, they really don't know. Um, I have been in a previous relationship where the person didn't get it and didn't work. So part of my agreement of being with Mark and with Mark's commitment was realizing that this was a huge part of who he was. First of all, as an athlete, and then as a coach. And I didn't want to do anything that was going to interfere with him being able to realize that significant part of him in the same way that he's backed, whatever it was I was doing academically or with my own hobbies or I still coach and are involved in my own sport at a master's level. And he supports that in the same way. So it's very much a mutual relationship of respect. Um, it is hard, and I'm not going to pretend that it isn't, particularly when you have, we were only blessed with one child, but when you have young children, it is not easy. I gave up a lot so that Mark could continue to play ball first and then coach. And I believe, honestly, our daughter would say that, for a lot of her young life, and certainly in the summer, her father wasn't here. He was away doing his job, his other job, which was to either play or to coach softball. And so as she was involved in activities and she was a provincial level volleyball player, I had a job where I could go and take her where she needed to go and be the support that she needed or that I wanted, to be that role. And when Mark was here, he came, and if he wasn't here in the summer, he couldn't go. So how do you explain that to somebody else? I don't know. I don't, other than I believe this business of respecting what really matters to someone and trying to understand why it matters so much to them.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing I would add to that too, Natasha, and I say this as a man that survived it, to be honest with you, in terms of relationship, but I think, for younger coaches, and I was certainly in this boat myself 15 years ago or so, that you don't realize how much you aren't doing to help. You really don't. And I think part of it's a male trait. And I often joke about the fact that she can walk into a room and see 15 things to do, and I can walk into a room and see a television. And because I really do, I don't see those things that she does. And is a perfectionist. She's a very strong type A personality. She's driven and motivated, and I'm not in that sense. And so it's we balance one another in the sense that she sees my blind spots, and I'd like to think that I see hers. But at the end of the day, the reality is that I had to learn over time that when I was here at home to be present, not to be on the computer, not to be on the telephone, not to do other things that actually were distractions to my spending quality time with Anne or with Jez. I had to learn that when I'm home, especially with how much I was gone, and now that I'm gone even more with coaching at the Olympic level and how much travel is involved, is that I very much try to be present when I'm home. So the computer goes away at 5 o'clock at night, and we sit and do things together. We talk together over dinner. We go for walks after supper. We plan our weekends where we can get out and do things together because Ann works all week, whereas I work from home. But you have to make a very committed and sincere effort to make sure that you're putting in the quality of time you need. And if you've got a young family, it's even more demanding because it's usually the wife that's spending, the lion's share of the time with the kids. So, from the male perspective, I think we have to be a little more tuned into, uh, I won't say meeting halfway because I don't think we ever meet halfway, but I think we have to be a little bit more in tune with being committed to spending quality time when we are present.
I really like that advice because I think that's really tangible for a coach to grab and to focus on is to be present when home and not be distracted and make the weekend plans or whatever to get out together. Like that advice right there is very tangible, and it's something you could write down and work on. So thanks for that, Mark. And I guess to further on that, I get a lot of questions from the coaches with young families. So we have a lot of our paid coaches in Nova Scotia, and I know across Canada that do have young families. I can think actually one of ours online tonight has two young children. Another one in particular keeps asking, has a toddler. So with those with really young kids, and it's their spouse that stays home with them. Did you have any travel strategies when you were away a lot? When you had a young daughter, that did you balance travel? Did you try to come home in between? Because I get the question from coaches, should I travel 2 weeks, try to come home a week, travel 2 weeks, or should I go away for a month? Should I bring the family away? And they're trying to figure and balance out the travel while away. What was your opinion, or what did you guys do to manage that?
Oh, wow.
It's a hard
Sometimes I
one.
don't even want to
Yeah.
think back to those days. And it was a while ago. It depended on where Mark was, where they were playing, or where he was coaching. Certainly, with long extended trips, Jazz and I didn't go
Okay.
on. And from the time she was 12, she was playing with the provincial volleyball team, so it wasn't a luxury to be able to go because her commitment for a lot of those summers was to be wherever they were training here in the province. So up until that time, if it was Halifax to Fredericton, so a 5-hour drive, we would go over to the island. If it was close by, it was certainly in Halifax. We would go and we'd watch and we'd walk around the ballpark or whatever. She wasn't very interested in any of it, I must say. But it was that we were there together, and we'd go for the meal afterward, and at least we were there as a
Yeah.
family. Any extended trips, and Mark did a lot of travel. We didn't go, and that was just, I mean, part of that would have been financial, and part of it was I would have no interest in doing that.
No, that's perfect because I got that
Wow.
asked today, like on long trips, is it better to take the family? I said, I don't know, but that's a good point. What if Anne, if you weren't interested in going, that's not going to help.
No. No.
Well, and I think in fairness, it really depends on the amount of time that you can spend. I mean, for example, Anne tends to make a couple of trips a summer now because I'm gone for extended periods. This summer I was away for 79 consecutive days, and she met up with me on two separate occasions for a week. But I mean, I call home every day. We talk every day that I'm away, no matter where I am in the world. I make sure that the time zones fit so that I can talk to Ann when I know she's awake. And if that means I have to wake up early to make the call, I do. Because to me, it's important to be connected, to know what's happening in her life every day, her to know what's happening in my life every day, because that's part of the connection piece. So that is something I do. I think, it's very individual. If you have a young family that likes to travel and a wife that wants to be there, by all means, you should have them there. But the other thing is, if they don't want to be there, you have to respect that too. And paddles masters canoe has the last 10, 12 years. It's a huge commitment, although they're masters level. They're on the water 3, 4, 5 times a week. They work very hard towards the championships they compete in. And I have to be mindful that although I'd love to have her with me all summer, there's other things that she wants to do. We've got a beautiful property that takes care of. She's got gardens that she likes to take care of. I have to be mindful that although my preference would be to have her with me, there are things that are equally important to her. So we look at my schedule once it's set for the summer, and we figure out those points in time when she would like to come, when it doesn't interfere with things that are also important to her. Also for me, because the truth is I don't want her to be there if I can't spend time with her. If I'm going to be at the ball field all day, or we're at an event that I need to put in a lot of time scouting the opposition or things of that nature, then I feel guilty when I'm off doing my job because Anne's sitting in a hotel room by herself, or she's sitting in a ballpark without anybody else that she knows. So it's really important to communicate around when does it make the most sense? When can you spend somewhat quality time together when you are together, so that when you're apart, it doesn't seem to be, the distance doesn't seem to be so great because you've invested in making sure that when you could be together and spend time, you took advantage of it.
And I would just add to that. I realize the extensive commitment that Mark has to the team, to the players, to the other coaches, to all the arrangements have to be made, overseeing. And I'm not interested in running interference with any of that. So if I'm not there, his total focus is on the team. If I am there, I feel that I'm a little bit of a distraction. We get our chance to go for a walk in the morning. We have our meal together when we can. Um, you know, we've had plans lots of times and something has come up and those plans have to be changed and you have to be okay with that. If you're not okay with that, don't go and try to be part of it. It's we will have planned a little bit of a special meal or a special little trip and we could go and something would come up and that would end. Well, that's just part of it. And that's the reality of coaching, and that's the reality of if someone gets injured or if there's a problem or if there's a change in the schedule. And so if you're going to be bothered by any of those kinds of things, then it's not going to work. I just don't feel it's going to work. And sometimes it's easier not to go and be that distraction.
Yeah, I think that's
Not even about small children, but about knowing that there's an incredible responsibility. He's responsible for a lot of human beings, a lot, how this team does ultimately, et cetera, et cetera. So as much as I, by times, would love to be there and part of all of it, it's, I feel like I'm a bit of a distraction when I'm there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good understanding that you have, Ann, and what you just said is a great piece for anyone, any coach's partner to hear and have that understanding of what goes on when the coach is on the road, because it's true. And I do know a lot of coaches, including myself, make that mistake. I flew my own family out to a conference one time and it was a disaster. And luckily, my own husband was open and said afterwards, okay, that didn't work. Don't do that ever again. But it was a learning curve. So.
No, but it's done with the best of
Yeah.
intentions. And I think the ideal of it is beautiful. But the reality of it isn't that. The ball games that go until 1 o'clock in the morning and then all of the stuff that's got to be done, little children, that's not going to work. So, I mean, the reality of what it's going to look like has to be taken into consideration.
I think it's perspective too. I thought it was great, but from the other side, yeah, you're waiting around all day waiting for someone to come home. That's not fun. So, and I guess, Anne, a question for you is: do you feel that it's been important that you've stayed so busy? Like you're a busy person, you have lots of your own activities. Does that, in your opinion, help when Mark, say, is traveling or the other person's traveling away a lot?
I don't think there's any question that it certainly has worked for me. If I were retired, that would be very different. I have my job as a faculty member, and it's really important to me, and it's a big part of who I am, and I take that role and responsibility very seriously, summer or during the academic year, so that doesn't matter. My training and my coaching with my group, first of all, I love. And then second of all, I just really enjoy, and that's another responsibility that I've taken on. But if you're a homeowner, somebody has to cut the lawn, someone has to stack the wood, someone has to be here, or at least some of the time has to be here. Mark was gone literally all summer, so this past year. So I feel someone has to be here. I don't like the house being vacant. I love my yard, as Mark pointed out. I love my gardens, and to me, it's really therapeutic and it's a hobby, and I want to do that. So why should I not do that, or why should I have to give any of that up? Because Mark has a job that started as kind of a hobby, his sport. Why should I give up all of what I want to do and be because he's able to pursue his dream? I don't want to compromise all of what is important to me just so that he can have all of what is important to him, any more than I would have given up what was important to our daughter, in any expectation of us traveling around after him rather than her being able to pursue her goals, which mattered to her.
Yeah, and I think it's an important aspect because I did get asked fairly recently by a coach, like my spouse is constantly asking me, what I'm doing when I'm coming home, that they're bored. And I guess my question to that person was, can we find something for your spouse to do? So I think it's an important thing that in your relationship that's worked is that you're both very busy in your own thing.
You have to have hobbies or you have to have activities that I think that keep you busy. I think that's just part of staying, involved and engaged. I think it's healthy in terms of challenging yourself, whether it's physically or mentally. And I'm very fortunate that Anne's very good at that, always has been, very independent in her own right. And we're fortunate. I certainly recognize that if I were married to anybody other than Ann or different than Ann, I very well might be one of those statistics myself, because my sport was and is that important to me that, I'm not sure that as a younger person, I wouldn't have chose my sport over my relationship. But, in the relationship I'm in, because of the partner I've had, because of the understanding we have, because of how much sport has meant to our collective lives, I'm very, very fortunate. And I think I'm in a very unique situation. I don't think by any stretch of the imagination that our relationship is the norm.
Right. Yeah, and that's good to kind of get out in the air too for those that who may be struggling right now. And a question for both of you. What do you feel were the biggest stressors on your relationship over those 30 years? Like, what do you think were the things that put strain on it that you then had to work through? In regards to sport in your career, not outside that, sorry. Just to define that.
All of them.
Don't mean to
We don't
open
have
a
enough
weird
time.
can there.
That's not true. Parenting, without
Yeah.
question. For me, it would be parenting. I mean, I don't like when Mark's gone. I really don't. We have a relationship that's very much involved in talking every day, being present every day. I check in with Mark. It matters to me that he's here with me, supporting me, and I bounce things off him. And so I find it really hard when he's away. So I don't like it at all when he goes, but it's part of his job, and it's been part of our reality the 30 years that we've been together. So I'm kind of getting used to it, but really not very used to it. I still don't like it. But I did find parenting hard. And as I say, we were only blessed with one. But there's times when you want to break. There's times when you're a little frustrated. There's times when you don't really feel like driving down to Antigonish to drop what fill in the blank for whatever it is that you'd prefer not to be doing that day or that week, and you would really like to have someone there to share those responsibilities. And just the respect that I have for Mark and the wonderful dad that he is, I wanted that influence with Jazz more than not. So that part was a little bit hard by times, but I would think that was the biggest. I'm like I am independent. I have no problem. I cut the lawn, I load the wood, all those things I love to do. That's not work to me. That's all part of what I really enjoy. So it's none of that kind of stuff. And besides the fact I'm way better at all of that kind of stuff than fixing up around the house than Mark will ever be. But that in raising our daughter, I would have loved to have had him around more to be involved in more of that, just because it would have mattered to both of us.
And as a parent, for me that as well, the being away, the missing things, the hearing on the phone afterwards about the game or how well she played or how excited she was, those are the things that hurt, because you can't get that back. That's a time that you weren't there to participate in, and that's what made it so much more important to me that between September and May, I wanted to be the one that dropped her off, that picked her up, that went to her games, that talked about the good games, the bad games, and all of those things that parents do, because I always knew there was going to come that window of time later in the year when I couldn't be there to do that. And so that was important to me. And I think, again, that's that presence piece that I think as fathers, it didn't matter whether I got off a flight at 3 in the morning. If Jazz had to be somewhere the next morning at 9, I was in the car, and when I went for the drive, whether I was present the whole time or not, I went because it was important. While I was home, I was there, and I was doing those things. And I think that's one of those commitments that, as a parent or as a parent that's a professional coach, you just have to accept the fact that there's times when you got to suck it up and do what needs to be done, regardless of how you feel, because for a very long time, your partner was carrying the load while you weren't there.
I think that's fantastic. I want to just capture that, pass it on to people. So thanks, Mark. I want to make sure those online, if you have any questions, make sure you're typing them away so we can ask Mark and Ann while we have them captured here as a captive audience with us. So another question that I had, oh, sorry. Is there a single thing or a couple things that you felt you two did as a couple to allow it to work through the years? So up and down through parenting and not, something that you did consistently that you thought helped keep things together?
Mark made the comment that every day we talk, and whether he was in his job in Halifax, we talk every day. when he was working in Halifax. When I'm in the office in Wolfville, 20 minutes away, we talk every day. When Mark has been in South Africa, when no matter where Mark has been in our 31 years, there have been, I think, 2 days that we did not talk every single day. I think there have been two.
That's
And for
incredible.
me, that was um, that mattered. That mattered. And sometimes I'm sure he was listening to me nattering on about stuff, but I needed that outlet, and I needed him to play the role that he always plays for me of being the sober second thought, and what about this, and bounce it off. And Jazz dealt with this today, so can you drop her a really encouraging text or email, and just so that and so that kind of contact. Now it makes it a lot easier with phones and the computers and everything now, and that's a different game, but that every single day having that contact for me is what's made the difference. And that it mattered to Mark that he called. I mean, I can think of nights when he'd be playing down in California and you'd go extra innings, and it would be maybe 3 o'clock in the morning, but I wanted the phone call. I wanted to know you were safe. I wanted to know how the game went. It just, to me, that's what's made the biggest difference.
Well, they say the things that cause relationships to fail are money, sex, and communication. And the bottom line is communication. Of those three things, in my opinion, communication is the most important. If you aren't connected to your partner, connected to your family, in tune with the thinking that goes on, part of the decisions that are being made, whether you're physically present or not, then those are the things that I think contribute to why people wake up one day and decide, I don't want to do this anymore. And I recognized very early on with the amount of travel I was doing as an athlete, and then eventually it became as a coach, that if I wanted to stay married to the same person, then I had to make sure that I could do everything in my power to maintain that strong connection piece. We've always had that. We've always been able to communicate very well together. And so, even when I was in Japan for much of last summer, the fact that I could talk to Anne every day, you don't feel like you're 7,000 miles away, because tomorrow you're going to call at the same time, and you're going to pick up the thread where you left off, and you're going to hear about what happened today, and you'll hear again about what happened tomorrow. And so the distance, it's amazing. You don't feel the distance, although you physically can't see and be with the person. The distance doesn't seem to be the same because you talk every day. So you know what's going on back home, in your community, with your family every day.
Mm.
And that's not the same as a text. To me, it's not. I mean, we text and all that too, but it's that phone call, and sometimes it's a really short phone call, and it always ends with "I love you" and "I love you." So that has made a huge difference.
That's awesome. I think that's really great advice. So thank you guys for that. It's fantastic. Um, and I wanted to ask you both a very similar question here. So, Mark, what advice would you offer to coaches to maintain that long-term relationship? So, whether it is the phone call, if you have anything else, and then perhaps those raising families. And then the second part is, what advice would you offer to their spouse? So, you as a coach.
Well, to the coach, whether it's male or female, it's about being present and being aware of enormous um, the enormous sacrifice that your partner is making to allow you to pursue your goals. Because at the end of the day, that's really what they're doing. They're putting the things that they would prefer to be doing on hold so that you can do the things that you prefer to do or you need to do. I think it's recognizing that, and not just in terms of knowing it, but finding ways to to honor that in terms of doing things with your family and making sure you find those times to, whether it's Disneyland, whether it's Oaklawn Farms, whether it's a weekend in Halifax, it doesn't matter. But what are the things you're consciously doing and planning to celebrate and recognize the sacrifice your family is making for you to allow you to do what you do? I think from a spouse's perspective, it is about really trying to understand that no different than any walk of life, to be successful or to have a chance to be successful, you have to be invested, you have to be committed, and you have to be willing to work very, very hard. Coaching is for sure, of all of the jobs I've ever had, the hardest job I've ever had, because it's communication driven, because the assets and liabilities are people. And it takes a lot of energy and a lot of hard work to understand the personalities you deal with, whether it's male, whether it's female, whether it's younger, whether it's older. My job is to understand the other 24 personalities that I work with every day whether it's a coaching staff member, whether it's an athlete, and find the best way I can to motivate them to be the best they can be. It takes a lot out of you. But you still have to understand you've chosen to do this. This is your job. You wanted to do this, and it doesn't negate your responsibilities on the other side. Your partner, I think, has to be willing to try to walk a mile in your shoes. They have to be willing to understand that if they truly support you and want you to be successful at what you do, then they have to recognize there's an element of sacrifice that goes with it. And again, it goes back to the conversation. When we talked about, my taking on this job full time 17, 18 months ago, leading to the Tokyo Olympics, we talked about all of the potential scenarios, such as being gone all summer, and then how much additional travel I've taken on in this role that was unforeseen, but it ends up being part of what you do. Next summer, I will be gone close to 120 days. You have to have that honest conversation with your partner. You have to make sure that everything that's about to happen or could possibly happen, you've talked through. You have a plan to deal with. If you're doing this where you know that it's going to be 2 weeks, but you're telling her one, it's going to be a month, but you're telling her 2 weeks, she'll catch on eventually, or he'll catch on eventually. And then that's going to be part of the demise of your relationship. So Ann and I put all the cards on the table. We knew exactly what we were signing up for that 3-year period. We knew that at the end of the 3 years, we would sit and reevaluate where our lives would go from there. But we're in this together. I may be the coach of the team, but, she's the co-pilot. And we are in this, and I can step on a plane and leave here as much as it pains me to leave home for as long as I go, with the comfort of knowing that my partner understands what I'm doing and supports what I'm doing. And if you can't walk out your front door knowing that, then sooner or later, that's going to probably be the reason things aren't going to work.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Mark. So, Anne, I'm going to turn it over to you and ask, what advice would you offer to a spouse who's in a relationship with a busy coach? And then what advice would you offer that coach to help make things work from the spouse perspective?
My first advice was maybe if I'd known when I was 30 years ago.
I was going to say, please don't say turn and run away.
Maybe I wouldn't have been so thoughtful about all of this. I haven't had one nice Nova Scotia summer in 30 years with my husband. I don't know. I think it would be really hard if you had a partner that didn't understand just what's involved in sport. I can see how that would be really difficult. The commitment, the amount of time, the hard work, what that really means, what that looks like. I think I can see it being really difficult. The advice for the spouse is, I think you have to know that there's going to be compromise, and that's it. I know who's given more as far as other things in this relationship to make this work. I mean, I know that. But I also know how dedicated my husband is to his trade and what it is he does and how good he is at it and how proud both Jazz and I are of him because of that. So I was prepared to compromise some, particularly when Jasmine was younger. It's very different if you don't have family. It's a totally different discussion. But when Jazz was young, when our daughter was young, I was prepared to give up a lot so that Mark could realize his dream and continue to do what he loved to do and what he was good at. And I'm okay with that. But the time did come where I said, I want to be able to get back to my sport. I want to be able to focus on, at one point it was to start a PhD. I want to be able to have what I want out of this life too. And it was very much the same kind of open discussion around what is that going to look like. So if you're going to travel to go and practice and train, and I have to do the same thing, but not on an airplane, just in a car, what's going to happen with our daughter? How is all of this going to work? But there is a compromise, but I think there's compromise in a lot of things in life, and we have to be okay with that. And I was. And as far as the advice to the coach, I think Mark put it so well of being present. Mark's other hobby is golf. So when he's home, those 4 and 5 hours that are gone in addition to everything else to golf, by times, that has to go. If there are things here that I would really love some help with around the house, or I really would like to get away for the weekend and it's not going to involve you being gone another 4 or 5 hours golfing, then the discussion is very short. That's it. we've made the agreement, and this is not going to be a weekend that involves golf. So give and take, compromise, um, live through your values, discuss what it honestly looks like, uh, try to share the responsibilities when you are around, do those little extras that make a difference and make the other person feel valued. And there's nothing like getting a lovely card and some flowers and just reassurance that they haven't forgotten about you and that you do matter to them. So whatever that looks like to you, then I think that goes a really long way.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Anne. That's great. So I'm going to ask again. We have a couple coaches online. If you have any questions for Mark and Anne, we'll get them asked now. And then Mark and Anne, that was the end of sort of the questions that I had pre-prepared or that I'd collected from coaches ahead of time. Do you have anything you'd like to add, either as part of your story or things you think coaches should hear or spouses should hear? Because both will be using this webinar moving forward.
I can't think of a more noble or honorable profession than coaching. It's to me, it's much like being a teacher, and I love having the opportunity to share the things that I've learned through sport and life with young people, and in pursuit of helping them achieve their goals. And it's, as I said a few minutes ago, it's a very, very demanding job, but it's one I absolutely love and wouldn't trade for anything in the world. And I'm so fortunate. I've got the best wife in the world. I tell people that all the time, but I do. I've got an incredible partner that has allowed me to pursue my goals, my dreams, to do something that I think I was born to do and that I have had a fair bit of success at. And you just have to make sure that the person that you're with is on line or on board with what it is that you want to do. And if they're not, well, then that's a conversation you have to have as well. But you've got to go into this thing together. It's a partnership, for the good and much like a marriage, right? Better or worse, sickness or poor, it's the same thing. This is a partnership that we're in, and we're going to see it through to 2020 together, regardless of how it falls out. And then at the end of that, we'll reevaluate and decide what's the next chapter of our lives. But you have to enter these things together and face whatever's coming your way together. And I think if you approach it that way, you have a better than average chance of being successful with it.
I mean, I just think you have to be kind to each other. You have to be considerate. I think you have to be present. I think you have to communicate well. Respect is just such a big part of a successful relationship, and compromise, seeing what matters to the other person, not compromising too much of yourself, not compromising too much of, what can be for your children, and trying to find a successful equation that's going to work for all of you in some way, realizing that you have to compromise some.
I think that's excellent. And I just want to thank you two both for, I know myself, I made some notes to make sure that I can continue sharing, and it filled the page pretty darn quick. So thank you very much for that. So I'll ask one more time, coaches online, if you want to ask any questions while we have these guys live, we'll do that now. And if not, we'll log off in a few minutes. And Danielle, I know you missed the first few minutes, so I'll be sharing the recording with people. So Annika says no, thank you though. So we'll wait another minute. But yeah, Anne and Mark, I just fantastic. And what was really great was some of the tangible things that you said. So things like talking every day, that's something that coaches can take and do moving forward. And the real understanding of what it takes to be busy, and traveling and coaching is important as well.